Imagine a grain that feeds your muscles the way meat does, complete protein. All 9 amino acids your body cannot manufacture on its own. Imagine it grows in sand, in drought, in 100-degree heat on land so degraded nothing else will germinate. Imagine a single plant produces enough seed to feed a family for a week. Now imagine an empire burned it, banned it, cut off the hands of anyone caught growing it, not because it was dangerous, because a population that can feed itself from dust cannot be enslaved. That grain still exists. It still grows, and you were never told. In southern Mexico, approximately 8,000 years ago, archaeological excavations in the caves of Tehuacan, Puebla, have recovered pale seeds dated to roughly 4000 BC. But the cultivation record stretches further. Amaranth seeds recovered from mid-Holocene-era archaeological sites in northern Argentina date back 7,000 to 8,000 years. This is not a new discovery. This is one of the oldest continuously cultivated food plants in the Western Hemisphere. Before wheat existed as a domesticated crop in Europe, before rice paddies were carved into the hillsides of southern China, indigenous peoples across the Americas were already grinding amaranth into flour and feeding civilizations with it. By the time the Aztec Empire consolidated power in central Mexico during the 15th century, amaranth had been elevated to something between a staple crop and a sacred institution. The Codex Mendoza and other colonial-era records document that the 17 provinces of the Aztec Empire sent nearly 20,000 tons of amaranth grain to the capital Tenochtitlan each year as tribute to the Emperor Montezuma. 20,000 tons. That volume placed amaranth alongside maize and beans as one of the 3 foundational crops of the largest pre-Columbian civilization in North America. Historical records suggest the Aztecs dedicated an estimated 200,000 acres to its cultivation, more acreage than any crop in the empire except corn. But amaranth was not merely food. The Aztecs popped the tiny seeds like miniature popcorn, mixed them with honey and sometimes human blood, and shaped the mixture into figures of their war god, Huitzilopochtli. These figures were paraded through the streets of Tenochtitlan, worshipped at the great temples, then broken apart and distributed to the people who consumed them. A communion, a ritual of consuming the body of a god, older than Christianity by thousands of years. When Hernan Cortes and his Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1519, they stood inside the temples of Tenochtitlan and watched this ceremony. They were horrified, not because it was violent, because it looked familiar. It resembled the Catholic Eucharist, the body of a god, broken and consumed. To the Spanish Church, this was not culture. This was blasphemy. This was a satanic perversion of their holiest sacrament performed by people they considered subhuman. And so the systematic erasure began. The conquistadors and the Catholic Church did not merely discourage amaranth. They launched a coordinated campaign of agricultural destruction. Fields were burned across the provinces, seed stores were destroyed. The cultivation and possession of amaranth was formally banned, and the punishments were not symbolic. Historical accounts preserved through both colonial records and indigenous oral histories. A document that the Spanish cut off the hands of anyone caught growing or saving amaranth seeds. Others were executed outright. Consider the nature of this act. They did not ban a weapon. They did not ban a poison. They banned a food, a grain, a seed smaller than the eye of a needle. The question is not why they feared it spiritually. The question is why they feared it materially. Because amaranth was sovereignty-made biological. A people who could grow their own complete protein in any soil, in any drought, with no dependence on irrigation, fertilizer, or any external supply chain, could never truly be conquered. They could never be broken into the plantation economy the Spanish intended to build. They could never be made dependent. The Spanish understood something that modern food systems still do not want you to think about. Control the food, and you control the people. Remove the food, and you remove the resistance. The ban nearly succeeded. For 300 years, amaranth virtually disappeared from the agricultural record of the Americas. Wheat, barley, and European grains replaced it. The colonial economy was restructured around crops that required infrastructure the colonizers controlled. Amaranth was pushed to the margins, to the remote mountain villages, to the hidden valleys where the Spanish could not reach. But it did not die. In radical acts of courage that spanned generations, indigenous farmers in remote regions of Guatemala, Oaxaca, the Andes, and the American Southwest continued to grow amaranth in secret. A Maya Asii woman named Aniceto Toj, living in Rabinal, Guatemala. During the country's brutal civil war between 1960 and 1996, buried amaranth seeds in the earth before fleeing into the mountains to escape military death squads. When she returned years later to find her village destroyed, her fields burned. She dug into the ground where her home once stood and found the seeds untouched. Waiting, she planted them. They grew. When the first leaves emerged from that devastated soil, it was not just agriculture, it was resurrection. Seed savers across Mesoamerica passed caches of amaranth from mother to daughter, father to son. Not as a crop, as an act of defiance, the fact that amaranth still exists today, that you can buy alegrias, those sweet honey amaranth crackers, on any street corner in Mexico City, is a 500-year-long act of resistance against an empire that tried to erase it from the earth. Now here is what is actually inside this grain, because the science is what the suppression was designed to keep you from learning. Amaranth contains 14 to 18% protein by dry weight. That is higher than wheat, higher than rice, higher than corn, higher than oats. But the number alone does not tell the story. Most grains are what nutritional scientists call incomplete proteins. They are deficient in one or more essential amino acids, typically lysine. Your body cannot construct complete muscle tissue from wheat protein alone. You need to combine it with legumes or animal sources to fill the gaps. Amaranth is different. Peer-reviewed analysis published in the journal Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition confirms that amaranth grain contains all 9 essential amino acids. Its lysine content reaches 5 to 6 grams per 100 grams of protein. Those are levels you typically find only in animal sources, like eggs and dairy. Researchers in Guatemala found amaranth to be one of the most nutritious plant-based proteins ever documented. This is not a supplement. This is not a laboratory creation. This is a wild seed that functions as a standalone complete protein and has done so for 8,000 years. The nutritional profile does not end with protein. Amaranth delivers more iron than most cereal grains, more calcium than milk per equivalent, serving significant levels of magnesium, phosphorus, manganese, and vitamin B6. It is rich in dietary fiber. It is naturally gluten-free, and it contains something almost no other grain on earth possesses: squalene, a compound primarily found in shark liver oil at concentrations the cosmetics industry harvests by killing deep-sea sharks. Amaranth seed oil contains 6 to 8% squalene naturally. The antioxidant and skin repair properties of squalene drive a multi-billion-dollar industry. The most ethical and sustainable source on the planet grows in a plant most Americans have never heard of. Now consider the agriculture. Amaranth is classified as a C4 photosynthetic plant, the same category as corn and sorghum. C4 plants are significantly more efficient at converting sunlight and carbon dioxide into biomass under hot, dry conditions. Published research confirms that grain amaranth requires 40 to 50% less water than both wheat and maize to produce equivalent yields. It can set viable seed after 40 consecutive days without rain. It thrives in sand, in clay, in degraded, depleted, abandoned soil where conventional grain crops fail entirely. A single amaranth plant can grow 6 to 10 feet tall. A single mature plant produces 1 to 2 ounces of seed in average soil, and up to 1 pound per plant in fertile conditions. Each pound of amaranth contains approximately 500,000 individual seeds. The Palmer amaranth species, a close relative of grain amaranth, can produce up to 500,000 seeds from a single female plant. The reproduction rate is so aggressive that American farmers now classify Palmer amaranth as the single most destructive superweed in United States row crop agriculture. That last fact should stop you. The modern agricultural industry spends billions of dollars each year trying to kill a plant whose edible relatives could solve protein deficiency across the developing world. Palmer amaranth has developed resistance to glyphosate, the most widely used herbicide on the planet. It has developed resistance to ALS-inhibiting herbicides. A New York Times investigation documented how Palmer amaranth can suppress soybean yields by nearly 80% and corn yields by roughly 90% when left uncontrolled. Farmers are spending unprecedented sums on chemical cocktails to destroy a plant that, in a different context, could feed the communities those farms are supposedly serving. This is not an accident. This is a pattern. And the pattern has a structure. In 1975, the National Academy of Sciences published a landmark study titled Underexploited Tropical Plants with Promising Economic Value. Amaranth was selected from among 36 of the world's most promising crops. In 1984, the National Research Council followed with a dedicated report titled Amaranth: Modern Prospects for an Ancient Crop. The science was clear. The nutritional data was irrefutable. The drought tolerance was documented. The yield potential was confirmed. The recommendation was unambiguous. Amaranth should be developed as a major global food crop. That was 40 years ago. Look at your grocery store today. Wheat flour occupies an entire aisle. Corn products fill 3 more. Soy is in virtually every processed food you touch. Amaranth, if it appears at all, sits in a small bag on the top shelf of the specialty health food section, priced at a premium that most families cannot justify. Ask yourself why. Amaranth has no corporate lobby. It has no government subsidy program. The wheat industry receives billions in federal support. The corn industry receives billions more. The soy industry operates under a subsidy and insurance structure so massive that economists at Harvard have published papers documenting how it disrupts the entire American food system toward overproduction of cheap, nutritionally inferior calories. These 3 crops, wheat, corn, and soy, formed the backbone of a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure of seed patents, chemical inputs, processing facilities, and distribution networks. Amaranth threatens that infrastructure at every level. It requires no chemical fertilizer. It requires no herbicide when grown as the primary crop. It requires no irrigation in most climates. It requires no patented seed because it reproduces prolifically from open-pollinated varieties that any farmer can save and replant indefinitely. It grows on marginal land that conventional agriculture has abandoned, and it produces a nutritionally superior product, a crop that anyone can grow, anywhere, with no inputs, no patents, no corporate dependency, that produces a complete protein from degraded soil and 500,000 seeds per plant is not a business model. It is a threat to a business model. The second suppression happened not with swords, but with economics. When the American health food movement rediscovered amaranth in the 1970s, production began expanding. Small growers in the Midwest and Southeast saw the potential, but commercial infrastructure never developed. No major processing facility was built for amaranth. No commodity exchange listed it. No futures market was established. No federal crop insurance program was created for it. Meanwhile, hybrid seeds sent to developing nations by American aid programs created dependency cycles that pulled farmers away from traditional crops, including amaranth. In Guatemala, farmers who planted foreign hybrid seeds discovered that saved second-generation seeds were not viable. They were forced to purchase new seed every season or stop farming entirely. Some gave up the traditional crops, the ones that had fed their families for millennia, were displaced not by a better product, but by a captive market structure. India understood what the West refused to acknowledge. In India, amaranth is called Rajira, which translates to the king's grain. For centuries, it has been the grain of choice during Hindu fasting periods, chosen precisely because its complete protein and dense mineral content could sustain the body when all other food was restricted. India is now a major exporter of amaranth grain and the source of most amaranth sold in the United States. America cannot be bothered to grow it commercially, so it imports it from a country that never forgot what it was worth. The environmental case makes the economic suppression even more difficult to justify. Amaranth's C for photosynthesis means it fixes carbon dioxide at rates that dwarf those of wheat and rice. A 2024 review published in Frontiers in Environmental Science confirmed that fast-growing species like amaranth contribute meaningfully to carbon sequestration and improved soil health. Its rapid growth cycle and deep root systems help regenerate degraded soils, pulling carbon from the atmosphere and depositing it into the ground. While the global timber and agriculture industries debate carbon credits and offset schemes, a plant that could sequester carbon, rebuild soil, produce complete protein, and feed families from barren land sits in roadside ditches across the American countryside, being sprayed with herbicide. The name itself carries the final message. Amaranth comes from the ancient Greek word amaranthos. It means the one that does not wither, the unfading, the immortal. The Greeks named it for a flower that never died. The Aztecs called it the food of immortality. In Milton's Paradise Lost, amaranth grows in the Garden of Heaven itself. 8,000 years of continuous cultivation, 500 years of active suppression, 300 years of imposed silence. And it is still here, growing in the cracks of every parking lot, every railroad embankment, every abandoned field in America. The Spanish burned the fields. The grain came back. The Guatemalan military enacted scorched earth policies across indigenous farmland. Women buried the seeds and dug them up years later. The American agricultural industry classified its relatives as superweeds and spent billions trying to poison them out of existence. They developed resistance and grew back stronger. You cannot kill amaranth. That is not a metaphor. That is botany. The Japanese did not need to ban it. They did not need to suppress it. They simply never forgot what it was. When Japan's Ministry of Agriculture identified priority crops for food security research in the 21st century, amaranth was on the list. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.